Welcome back to Quick Notes with Chris on. Today we're going to be continuing our line of the 21 laws of irrefutable laws of leadership. Today we're going to be talking about number 13, the law of reproduction by John C. Maxwell. Now this one is very interesting because it's very similar to two of the other laws, one being the law of exponential growth and the other one being the law of empowerment. So going back to that law of empowerment, it basically talks about how no teacher can actually empower any other student unless they themselves have the knowledge or empowerment themselves. So people cannot give to others what they do not possess. So the law of reproduction, basically, very similar to the law of exponential growth, talks about developing other leaders in itself. So utilizing your teachings, understanding what you've learned, and passing it on to others. Now, the reason why you want to do that, very similar to towards the benefit, outside of just genuine philanthropy and developing other people and making it a better overall situation, essentially what ends up happening is that you run into a problem as a leader. Especially, it's very easy to run a successful business. It's super simple to run a successful business. But what becomes very difficult is to essentially run a company, an organization, and something that's essentially out of your control. See, to put that into a better understanding is, if you ever run regional branches or businesses that are outside of your jurisdiction or outside of your normal, areas, how do you expect a business to grow if you've set it up so that it can only be developed when you're present? Well, that's a huge problem that a lot of people run into, especially when they look towards moving over into that multi-million-dollar faceted amount of money. So, and the way that you essentially overcome that is by duplicating yourself. You cannot be at two places at once, but you can have two same mindsets at the different places at once. So for example, if there's 10 organizations that I'm running across 10 different states or 10 different countries or whatever, how do I expect myself to be present at every single one? Well, it's impossible. I can't do that. But what I can do is put positioned leaders, people who've been trained to understand how to act, how to respond, and how to lead certain people, especially under my certain moral judgment, belief, or values. Making sure that the company is consistently being run at a correct standard while also expanding at a certain consistent growth. And that's what the law of reproduction talks about, is reproducing yourself. See, why don't all the leaders develop other leaders? Well, major part of that is because of the law of solid ground. So many people are so concerned with developing the next competitor or the person that's going to stab them in the back. And well, that's why the law of solid ground is so imperative and important, because without it, you can't do this one effectively. You don't know whose blade you're sharpening to stab in your own back. So it's very important that you literally have such a foundation and a solid foundation of the law of solid ground before you start implementing these other ones. I would argue that the law of solid ground is so important because it falls into all these other different areas. So some don't really see the value in others. That's the main reason why they don't do it. They more so see the risk in it. And I understand the risk, but you're always going to, just like any other risk, if you don't play the gamble in developing someone else, especially if you don't have the intuition in order to make sure that you're developing the right people, you're going to cap yourself in terms of your potential. The next one is some focus too much on their followers. They focus more on getting people to follow into what it is they're doing, whether it is they're running an organization because they feel powerful whenever people are doing exactly what they say. For an example, I know a few leaders who are working in so many different sales teams, and they're so scared of developing the next competitor that rather than developing a leader within their team so that they can basically branch off into other areas and suburbs, they focus too small scale, so they limit themselves because of that risk. Now, what you're able to achieve is being able to run multiple teams at once, and instead of leading hundreds of followers, you can lead hundreds of leaders who in turn leads hundreds of followers, and so on and so on and so on, and you sort of duplicate it and so on. And a huge reason is because leaders are insecure. That's just the number one reason. They either have issues within themselves of giving empowerment to others, or they just genuinely have a level of fear that stops them from basically moving forward. But understanding the key should definitely be a level of reproduction as long as you have the law of solid ground in place. And that's why I think it's so important that you develop that first. So we teach what we know, okay? And we produce what we are. That's the law of reproduction. So we teach what we know and we produce what we are. So ensuring that you first have to be a person who understands the full, complete understanding of leadership before you can teach it to someone else. Because if you aren't, all you're doing is duplicating an incomplete leader. Now, I understand that you're never going to be complete, but normally what happens is your teachings and whoever you teach, they will duplicate probably about 20% of what you do right and 200% of what you do wrong. So understanding that leadership isn't necessarily about being the perfect leader, but it's also about more so mitigating your weaknesses. So if you're an individual who's always attempting to do the right things, he might not be 100% correct in execution, but mitigating all the weaknesses and wrongdoings, then your team is naturally going to follow by example in your striving for being correct in leadership. And if you can duplicate that in such a fundamental way, then your followers will always be striving towards becoming better versus just just imitating something that's better. See, leaders who develop other leaders, they see the bigger picture. There's so much more benefits around being able to run an organization from the side while only inspiring the leaders versus being limited to only inspiring the followers. And if you can understand the big picture, you can understand how much money is made in terms of developing leaders versus just creating followers, then you'd understand that the big picture, that is exactly where you need to be focusing on, more so than genuinely your, I guess, inspiring the followers. Because if you look towards your bigger picture, if you have a large enough vision, the easiest way, no matter what it is, towards getting there, no matter how small or how big, is by having someone help you do it. And the way that you help someone do it is by developing another leader. And it's sort of like you need to look towards two ways. So you attract leaders, so you develop them and you attract them. Those are the two ways that you do it. And you also want to look towards creating an eagle-like environment. That basically means that if you know the sort of saying between the eagles and the chickens, is that so many people who are followers, they're chickens, and there's eagles who are basically think that they're chickens. And chickens are essentially people who believe that they can fly. They believe that they can fly, and you throw them up, but they can't fly. And sometimes, every now and again, an eagle is within that chicken flock. And what you want to basically do is understand and identify the eagles within the chicken flock, the ones that should be flying, the ones that should be flying with the other eagles. And if you look at eagles as leaders and chickens as followers, understanding the difference in how to find, inspire, and develop them. And understanding that there are some people that you should waste your time with and others that you don't. So there are some people that you shouldn't waste your time with because they are just chickens trying to be eagles, when in fact, based on how they've been nurtured, based on their set in their ways, unless they won't go through a traumatic event, it's very difficult to inspire them to become a leader. Finally, effective leaders cast a vision, offer incentives, encourage creativity, allow risks, and produce and provide accountability. Whereas so many other people, that's such a key word, freedom. See, in terms of creating a leader, you have to allow people to make their own decisions. You can't just be the one making all the decisions for everyone. Not only that, there's so many problems that come with that. Let me put an example for you. Imagine if you ran an organization where you're the person who needs to be at every present meeting whenever it comes to cutting deals with different partnerships or starting and expanding different areas. Let's say something happens, tragic, or circumstances occur where all of a sudden a day provides where you can't literally meet any of your meetings because something's occurred and it's forced you to be outside of the area or place that you need to be at that certain time. You're forced to give up ownership or person who's running that leader to someone who isn't prepped, isn't prepared, and realistically is just a follower who knows the correct things to say. All of a sudden, he's been forced to sit at these meetings and has agreed to deals that you personally wouldn't want to have agreed to, or said things that you shouldn't have said. And all of a sudden, your organization is either in a lot of indebtedness or you've basically gone in the correct or incorrect direction. Now, this is a common occurrence if in those circumstances when you've developed these large organizations, and it can also happen on a small scale. In terms of, let me just paint something very simple, like you're running a team and you've had a sick day, something's come up, and you've had to substitute certain hours or certain appointments, just normal appointments with normal people and normal customers and clients, with essentially people who aren't as prepared as you. Now you've essentially lost a whole day's worth of sale, which can result in a whole month's setback, and so on and so on and so on. So ensuring that you don't necessarily teach the correct people the correct teachings, the correct leadership, and developing them itself, at some point, may not be instantly, you will be bitten in the back. And that's what I see so many people run into. It's because they're so fearful of either not giving up their power, or two, developing someone who they're going to be a competitor. And once again, it just comes back to that law of solid ground. You want to invest in the people that you are trusting in, then and only then can you ensure that there's going to be a high return on your investment, because it is a very likelihood that the person you're mentoring, the person you're teaching, could very well take that information and use it against you. But you have to take that risk sometimes, especially if you have the correct intuition to do so. If a company has poor leaders, what little leadership it has will only get worse. You see, you duplicate what it is that you are. So in terms of your organization, if you feel as if there are a few leaders that you have chosen and they're sort of subpar, they're teaching the wrong things, the results are poor, expect that to get duplicated again downline. And you may be thinking, how does that start? Well, if you feel as if your organization has poor leaders, before you start looking towards firing them straight away, I'd look towards yourself. See, going back to that law of magnetism and that law of connection, you connect and magnetize the people who are similar to you. So if you're developing poor leaders, then you yourself are a poor leader. So the first thing you need to do is reflect on yourself. What is it, the teachings that you're giving off? Because remember this, people who you teach will always duplicate your wrongdoings far more often than your strengths and basically the right way to act. And I don't know why that is, because people generally just look towards doing the easier path. So you want to make sure that you develop yourself, minimize on your weaknesses, maximize on your strengths. Don't let people see what your wrongdoings are, right? Ensure that in the public eye and in terms of your team, but also behind closed doors, you're always operating in the correct way that a leader should, and respond to basically situations the proper way, and in order to duplicate that within your leaders and your organization so that it consistently grows. Anyways, guys, that's it for the Law of Reproduction by the 21 Irrefutable Laws by John C. Maxwell. I highly suggest you don't stop there. Keep looking towards putting yourself in a better improvement and position for success. But if you like what we're doing, like, comment, subscribe, share with a friend if you think it might help them, and I'll see you guys in the next video.